When you think about it, in your visual landscape with animals, you see them for months, years, and plants. So you have a familiarity factor. But mushrooms that come up and disappear in 4 or 5 days, some of them can feed you, some can kill you, some can heal you, some can send you on a spiritual journey. It's natural for humans to avoid that which they don't understand out of fear because they don't know the difference. But 23 primates consume mushrooms, humans being one of them. And so that speaks to a long ancestral use of mushrooms going back, in our primate evolutionary tree for a very, very long time. We separated from fungi 650 million years ago. We are descendants of fungi. We share a more common ancestry with fungi than we do with any other kingdom.
And fungi are closer to animals than they are to plants.
Animals came from fungi.
Okay.
And from a cellular point of view, under the microscope, human cells, animal cells, and fungal cells are very, very similar. We exhale carbon dioxide, we inhale oxygen. And it's really interesting that many of the bacterial diseases that infect fungi also infect us. Our best antibiotics against bacteria come from fungi, penicillin being the obvious example. And I suspect, and as these neural networks, they have more neural connections in the mycelial mass, they're over 1,000 acres, than we have in our brain. They are actually accumulating not only genetic intelligence, but I think that as time goes on, I hope that we will be able to interface with them, because I think that there is many benefits of us communicating with mycelium that can give us rapid responses to catastrophia. That's how they've evolved. And we're now the biggest walking catastrophe that I know. And we need to engage these fungal allies for the benefits that we need to put into play in order to prevent the loss of biodiversity.
It seems like a communication gap would be very hard to bridge. The concept of language, like you were talking about, just the idea of nature and intelligence and these words that we have sort of concrete definitions in our head that don't really apply to some things that are very, very confusing to us, like the idea of fungal intelligence, the idea that you could somehow or another understand the language that these things, we don't even understand dolphin language.
Well, one classic example, Japanese are so clever at this. There's a slime mold, called Physarum polycephalum. And this slime mold is very, very good at navigating through mazes and challenges. They designed basically a nutrient-like maze replicating Tokyo in the Japanese subway system. They started with Tokyo and they put oats, which is a nutritional source. They inoculated what is on this basically an agar map with all the major cities, the nodes around Tokyo. And they then each of those nodes had a piece of oat on them. The main oat was where Tokyo was. They inoculated it, and then they let the slime mold grow. And first it grew out randomly, exploratorily, and then after about 28 hours, it reorganized itself in the most efficient way possible and reorganized the Japanese subway system in a more efficient manner than it's designed today. Thus, they said this is a demonstration of cellular intelligence.
Whoa. This
has broad implications. And I just want people to suspend their disbelief. And this goes into actually the evolution of human consciousness. And Terence McKenna was a good friend of mine. Terence and Dennis both came up with a stoned ape theory. Now, it's not a theory, it's a hypothesis. But the hypothesis of the stoned ape is that with climate change and as the savannas increase and our primate ancestors came out of the forest canopies, they're tracking across the savanna. And if you're a hunter, what do you look? You look for footsteps and you look for scat. And the most significant fleshy mushroom going out of poop, a hippopotamus, elephant, deer, antelope, etc., is Psilocybe cubensis. It's a very large mushroom. You're hungry, you're with your clan, you consume it, and then 20 minutes later you are catapulted in this extraordinary experience. Psilocybin substitutes as serotonin, becomes a better neurotransmitter, activates neurogenesis, it causes new neurons to form, new pathways of knowledge. So that's the stoned ape hypothesis, and it speaks to a mystery that the human brain, basically the brain cavity doubled in size in about 2 million years. Some people say it's less than 200,000. So if we accept 2 million years we have a suddenly doubling of the human brain. And with that, our language centers increased, our ability to prognosticate, to plan. And there's no explanation for this currently. And even though we may not be able to prove it, I ask people to suspend their disbelief for a second. Now think of this. Our primate ancestors are going across the savannah. They ingest these mushrooms as a clan. Massive input for anyone who's eaten these mushrooms. Huge amounts of data is coming in. Fractal patterns, geometrical landscapes occur. You have empathy. You have greater courage. You're fighting a saber-toothed tiger. You know, one day you have a fear of it. We know now from neurogenesis and the extinction of the fear response that has been clinically proven, psilocybin allows you to reset and have different neurological pathways to respond to fear. So, but this wouldn't happen one time with one hominid group. It wouldn't happen 2 times, 10 times. It happened millions and millions of times over millions and millions of years. This leads to what I think is called epigenetic neurogenesis. So if you're the leader of your clan, you've had this traumatic event, either war or cataclysm, whatever the case may be. If you're the leader of that clan and you can overcome your fear response, you have courage and you have empathy. Those are leadership skills. People like to follow leaders who are courageous and yet kind, who they can trust. They'll have their best interests in mind. I think it's a very good explanation. It's an unprovable hypothesis. But now we're at a junction and we're ready for the next quantum leap in human consciousness.